afternoon, everyone. I'm Jamie Cashman, and we're happy that you decided to join us. I, along with Lucas Benkin, are your government relations team, and we're pleased that you join us to outline the proposed ISAC 2018 legislative priorities based on the recommendations of the ISAC Legislative Policy Committee. And our Legislative Policy Committee is chaired by ISAC's Second Vice President, Eric Stearman, who is the Dubuque County Treasurer. And the total LPC consists of 32 members, 2 from each affiliate. And this group develops ISAC's legislative objectives for the ISAC legislative team to pursue for the upcoming session. They meet twice, once in August, and this year it was held in conjunction with their annual conference. And then they meet again in September for 1 day to provide the final recommendations to the full membership and also the ISAC board. And here is the full listing of all the members of the LPC. Now, the ISAC legislative process consists of the LPC developing the policy statements and legislative objectives. And so a lot of times we get questions about what's the difference between a policy statement and an objective. Well, a policy statement basically sets a long-term or continuing statement of principal importance to ISAC, specifically in terms of local control and local government authority. And then the legislative objectives provide specific problems and solutions for legislators to address. And so this gives, based on that, then the ISAC policy team seeks out with other legislators specific bills to address those problems. And then based on our overall objective package, then top priorities are selected from all of the objectives, of which we have 16 this year, and the LPC recommended 5 to be the top priorities. So the overall process, like I said before, the LPC met in September to make the final recommendations to the ISAC membership and to the ISAC board. Obviously, we're doing a webinar right now today. And then in October 11th, next week, we'll be voting online this year as opposed to having a full vote by the membership at our annual conference. And Rachel will be outlining the voting tool after we get done here today. Then from October 11th through the 25th, voting is open. And then on November 1st, the results are mailed to the ISAC Board of Directors. And then from November 16th through the 17th, the ISAC Board will review the legislative priorities and ratify them, and then ultimately set the top priorities. And then on December 6th, Lucas and I will have another legislative webinar and roll out of all the top priorities. And after that, we'll go through our typical schedule of contacting individual legislators to seek drafting of bills, and also meet with legislative leadership and the governor's office. So here are the start of the 16 of our proposed legislative objectives. The first is, it came from the auditors, and it comes from closing of the polls. And basically what this calls for is that for the polls to change the closing of the polls from 9 p.m. to 8 p.m. Next, I'll turn it over to Lucas.
County infractions is a returning objective from a couple years ago. It was not an objective last year, and it makes its return. It is basically when a county has someone that owes for a zoning infraction, it can be collected in the same way as a nuisance or a public health violation, and would be collected on property taxes rather than a lien on the property.
And the next is the First Responder Safety Act. Basically what this would do is we require utilities to temporarily stop service in mandatory evacuation zones to protect first responders. Next is on food safety, specifically raising of food fees. As we've seen, fees not be raised in several years. A number of the county food inspection programs have been given back to the Department of Inspection and Appeals. We believe that counties can do it better on a much more timely basis, therefore increasing food safety for consumers and people that attend restaurants.
Groundwater hazard statement formatting exemption is a new objective this year from the recorders, and this would provide an exemption for groundwater hazard statements from the requirements for recorded documents. There's a list currently in code of those things that can be recorded that are exempt from those requirements, and this would simply add the groundwater hazard statement because it does not currently meet those requirements. And the master matrix review fee is also a returning objective, and this would allow for a fee to be charged to applicants while the master matrix process is being undertaken, and this would offset the cost to the property taxpayers that are currently paying for those reviews to be done both with environmental health and zoning officials.
Next is on mental health and disability services, and this was selected by the LPC as a recommended top priority for 2018. This is obviously something that ISAC has worked on over several years, and while we made some progress in terms of levy equity last year for counties within regions, there's still a tremendous demand to provide adequate services outside the correctional system, specifically the number of acute beds that need to be out there to meet the demand. And then the other part of it in terms of mental health and disability services is if the state is going to require regions and counties to provide children's mental health services, they have to provide the resources to cover them. Next comes from the auditors, publishing resolutions, and this is also a recommended top priority, and basically this would allow counties to publish summaries of resolutions in newspapers and then provide a reference where the full document can be found. The next also comes from the auditors as well, and basically what this would allow for the election deputy to receive 85% of the salary of the principal auditor.
Secondary roads is another returning objective and is recommended as a top priority this year. It has undergone several changes with the passing of the gas tax increase in 2015 and the federal aid swap in 2017. This has changed a little bit. We remain focused on maintaining the Time 21 distribution and the $225 million cap. It also calls for the state excise sales tax to be applied to dyed fuels and the exploration of different surcharges and impact fees for large operations such as confinement operations, fracking projects, and biofuel production facilities that have a disproportionate impact on secondary roads. Security interest provisions is also a returning objective, and this addresses the release of a lien on an automobile. There are 23 states that allow for either a form or a letter to be sent to release a lien on an automobile. Iowa is not one of those, so this would simply allow those items to be to take effect and to allow for the lien release, and this will allow both financial institutions and owners to be more efficient in releasing the liens on automobiles.
Next is a new objective in regard to super speeders. What basically this would penalize or increase the penalties for drivers by $200 for folks that are caught going 25 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Tax increment financing is another returning objective. It was not in our objectives last year, but several years ago. This comes from the supervisor's affiliate and calls for changes to the TIF law, including limiting TIF districts, all TIF districts, to a certain number of years, reestablishing the base year when there's a renewal or an expansion of a TIF district, and establishing a limit of less than 100% of the division of revenue for future projects. And tax reform is another returning objective and recommended as a top priority this year. Obviously, with the passage of Senate File 295 in 2013, we did have quite a bit of property tax relief for certain classes of property, but we believe there's still work to be done. A couple of things that we've been working on over the years. First, decoupling ag buildings from ag land, and also decoupling residential and agricultural property as it relates to the growth limitation. Additionally, on the growth limitation, there is a ceiling of 3% for ag and residential, but there's no floor. So we would look at putting in a lower limit on that limitation. And additionally, looking at a sales tax increase, the first 3/8 would go to the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, the Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, as approved by the voters in 2010, leaving 5/8 of a cent for other purposes. We would propose that that could be used for mental health funding and other property tax relief endeavors. Title to abandoned property is a new objective this year and would simply modify the timing of when abatements on property taxes take place when a city takes deed to a piece of property. This would change it from when a petition is filed to when the city actually takes possession of a piece of property. And finally, user fees is a returning objective. Just 2 additions this year. The marriage license fee, which has been on in previous years, makes a return this year. That would increase the fee from $35 to $45, and the county would retain that additional $10. And then moving the vital records fee to a set percentage rather than a set dollar amount.
Next is another recommended top priority on water quality management. This also mentions the Natural Resource and Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund and funding the trust, and also maintaining the current distribution formula and code. Additional things regarding water quality is calling for a revolving loan program for local entities for water quality infrastructure, funding for watershed authorities that can coordinate and target improvement areas in specific parts of the state, and also calling for the inclusion of counties in water mitigation projects. Next is on the casino smoking ban. These are legislative objectives that were removed. This is calling for a ban of smoking in casinos to protect workers, and this was moved for a policy statement. Sheriff's civil fees, this passed last year, and so this was removed from user fees.
The County Veterans Affairs structure was an objective last year that we were able to get signed by the governor, so that is removed. Delinquent mobile home taxes, something that we've been working on for a number of years in different forms. This is moving from an objective to a policy statement.
Distracted driving, this was moved to a policy statement. There was quite a bit of discussion as a result of the legislation that was passed. While we were fortunate to get primary offense for texting, it didn't go to the full route of going hands-free. And so the LPC thought it was very important to maintain that, and so they moved that to a policy statement.
The declaration of value filing for LLC transfers, a proposal from the assessors, was moved from objective to policy statement.
And then emergency management as public safety. This was basically a definition and to put emergency management as a definition for public safety agencies in Iowa code to keep this consistent with the feds, and this passed last year, so this was removed.
As I mentioned earlier, the federal aid swap was signed by the governor this past year, so this was removed from the secondary roads objective. And federal tax liens, also signed by the governor, is removed from objectives.
And then next is the funding of the co-location of DHS offices in county buildings. This was basically consolidated to include under unfunded mandates. And next was on local public health funding. This was moved to a policy statement and basically calling for an increase to $12.62 million in fiscal year 18 from $8.5 million that was funded in 17 to meet the demand for services.
And surviving owner title transfer was a new objective last year from the treasurers, and basically called for exempting from the title fee a surviving co-owner of a vehicle when the new title was issued, and this moves from an objective to a policy statement.
Next, we'll go into new policy statements.
Our first new policy statement is a statement simply stating that the assessor should be an appointed office, maintaining our current system of appointment of assessors. Next, we have the IPERS policy statement, which basically says that the system that we have is working. Our county officials believe that it's working and believe that we should be at the table if there's any discussion, but any drastic changes to the IPERS system would not be supported by ISAC. And maintaining the composition of the conference board is a policy statement in response to some legislation that was proposed last year to drastically change the power structure of the conference board, and so this basically says that the 3 taxing entities that currently make up the conference board is a system that is working and that ISAC supports. The registration, title, and lien across county lines is a new policy statement from the recorders dealing with ATVs, boats, and snowmobiles, and the ability to register, title, and release liens on these vehicles regardless of the county of origin.
Next is on REAP. Again, calling for the full funding of REAP funding to $20 million, and also to keep the current distribution formula. Next are the edited policy statements. In regards to the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy, basically it called for the full funding for improvements at the Johnston facility, but if they aren't going to fully fund the Johnston facility, to call for it to be moved to Newton. Next was on the master matrix, and these changes were made as a result of the conversation that's going on right now in Iowa among several counties in terms of calling for a review of the master matrix. And so basically what we're calling for is a review and with consultation with ISAC and the supervisors, and also provide some criteria to consider in terms of setback distances to vulnerable areas, looking at in terms of requiring a certain amount of points in all of the areas of the matrix, and then also removing the LLC loophole, which is currently out there that allows several facilities to fall underneath the animal threshold unit or threshold limit, and therefore they're not permitted.
The public bidding of in-house projects was updated simply to adjust the thresholds to the 2017 levels. Public sector collective bargaining was reworded in response to the major legislation that was passed this last year in House File 291. So we restated our opposition to big swings either in favor of management or the workforce, and called for maintaining a balanced public sector collective bargaining act.
Then the unsewered community.
Yes, this was simply updated to reflect the current number of cities with unsewered or undersewered infrastructure.
All right, with that, we'll open it up for questions. All right, well then we'll turn it over to Rachel to talk about our new online voting system.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will be talking about the new system, so if you have any questions, please type them into the chat bar and ask immediately. I'll just answer them as they come in. As Jamie mentioned earlier, a link will be sent out next week on October 11th. We went ahead and did a SurveyMonkey tool, so it's something that most of you should be familiar with. There will be a link in your email. You click on it and you go ahead and start the voting process. If you can't access the online voting tool for some reason, you can contact ISAC. You can send me an email or give us a call, and we'll be happy to send you out a PDF via email, a fax, or a hard copy via snail mail if you would like as well. Voting will be open again from October 11th until October 25th. So we must receive all votes before the end of the day on October 25th in order for them to count. Last week I sent out an email that kind of described the process of going through the vote. It included the qualifications of a voting member, voting instructions, and the authorization. These will be listed in full text when you go in to vote, but we thought having them ahead of time would speed up that process when you do go in. Some of the things I'd like to highlight, only voting members are allowed to vote. All elected officials of an Iowa county or the principal officer for that county department that are represented by an affiliated association are voting members. If you have any questions about that, we'd be happy to answer it. And then also, each person only gets to vote once. So even if you hold, if you're the principal officer for multiple departments, you only get to vote once. Voting instructions. So the way the process goes is the membership will vote, and then this vote will go to the board of directors. The board of directors will then approve the vote. They are allowed to make changes to the objectives or policy statement vote from the membership, but they must have 2/3 approval. Your recommendations will only be recommendations for the top priorities. The board will then set the top priorities. They will get 2 recommendations, one from the membership and one from the LPC, and they will make their, they'll set the top priorities based on that. And then lastly is the authorization of vote, which will basically just say you are who you say you are, and then we'll use that to make sure that you're eligible to vote. So now we're going to run through some screenshots of what it will actually look like when you click on the link. So this will be the top of the page, and first we'll ask for the qualification of a voting member. You'll need to acknowledge that you have read and understand the qualifications. Right there. And then next up will be the voting instructions. Same thing, you'll need to acknowledge that you have read those instructions. And then last up will be your authorization of vote. Again, you'll need to click the little button that says you have read that, and then you'll need to enter your full name, your county, and your title or position. This will act as your signature, and then you'll hit submit. If you did happen to miss any of those items, it will shoot you back to the top and let you know what you missed in red. You'll click it, and then you'll hit submit again, and you should be just fine going through. So next up will be the policy statements. This will begin when you actually get to begin voting. The policy statements will be voted on as a package. So we're not going to list the full text on the tool. You'll see exactly what you see here is what you'll see. If you want to read the policy statements in full, we did email them out last week, or if you click on the link right there, it'll open up a copy of all the policy statements. Then you go ahead and vote. You are allowed to leave comments. We do require a vote to make sure that you don't miss something inadvertently. And then you hit submit, and that'll submit your vote. Next up will be the objectives. We are asking that you vote on each objective separately. Again, there are 16 objectives, and all of the language will be listed out when you vote. So the first thing you'll do is, again, you'll vote on each of them by clicking yay, nay, abstain, and you can also leave comments if you wish. Then once you get to the end, after you've done all 16, you hit submit. Again, we ask that you do make sure that you vote on every single one just so you don't miss one. If you did happen to miss one, this is the little red note that'll pop up above the one you missed. So it'll just take you back up, you'll vote, you'll go back down and hit submit again. Lastly is your recommended top priorities to the ISAC board. You can only have a maximum of 5. And we are denoting the LPC recommended top priorities with those 3 asterisks, and then they'll be at the top of the list. The rest of them will be in alphabetical order. So again, we aren't listing all of the text just to make it a little more simple to find, but if you want to read the full text, again, you'll click on that link and find it. Again, those are the top priorities that were recommended by the LPC, but you're welcome to choose any 5 that you wish. And then once you've chosen your 5, you hit submit. If you happen to choose more than 5, it'll let you know, and you'll need to uncheck one of those boxes. And once you get to the perfect number 5, hit submit again, and you'll be done voting. So after you're done voting, you won't receive any sort of confirmation that you voted. We'll get your vote, and then after the 25th, we'll tally all the votes and send them to the ISAC Board of Directors. On November 16th and 17th is when the board meets. They'll vote to approve the policy statements and objectives, and then they'll also set the top priorities. And then again, once they have done all of their business, we'll come back with another legislative webinar on December 6th. We'll roll out the top priorities and objectives, and we'll kind of give an overview of the 2018 session. So if you have any questions, you can ask me now, or you can always email me or give us a call at any time. We'd be happy to walk you through, send you a PDF copy if you can't access the link, or anything else. If you happen to make a mistake when you're going through voting, just let us know and we'll figure it out. So if you have any questions for me or either of the legislative team members, let us know. Just type it into your questions box and we'll be happy to answer it. This webinar is being recorded, so if anybody would like to watch it again or send it out to folks in your office who missed it, it will be on our website under the Meeting and Events tab all the way at the bottom. It says Webinars. Seeing no questions?
All right. Well, thanks again for participating in this legislative webinar, and have a wonderful day.